Hi, everybody. It's me, Katie. Welcome back to my channel where it is all Revolutionary War all the time. It was here on Lexington Green on April 19th, 1775, where the Lexington Company of Militia, under the command of Captain John Parker, assembled to meet the British troops who were marching through Lexington on their way to Concord to seize military stores. Now, we all know the story of that fateful encounter. Shots were fired, and 7 members of John Parker's militia were killed, and several more wounded, 9 or 10 more wounded, for a total of 17 or 18 casualties here in Lexington on the first day of what would become the American Revolution. John Parker is probably one of the most iconic figures of those early days of revolution. But what do we know about him? What ended up happening to him? He would not live to see American independence. Let's go back to where it all began, the Parker family homestead. So this here is the site of the John Parker homestead, where the Parkers had lived for generations and where he was living on April 19th, 1775. It's important to note, however, that there are no original buildings left. There is no vestige of the home that he lived in 1775. That home was torn down in the 1830s. And as you can see, there's been a ton of development since then. But this is just the land. It's very much off the beaten track. So I'm kind of doing this so you don't have to, so you can at least get a glimpse of the site. This here is a plaque that's hanging off the tree, just kind of denoting that he was born on this property in general. And it stayed in the family for generations. He was living here in 1775 with his wife, Lydia, who was 44 years old, and he had been married for 20 years, and they had 7 children together, 3 boys and 4 girls, ranging in age from 18 years old to 4 years old. But as I said, it's important to note that none of these buildings are original. This is actually a school, and it is private property. They do have a sign requesting no unauthorized vehicles or foot traffic. So I do want to respect that. And again, there are no original buildings left that are actually associated with the Parker family. But I wanted to bring you at least to the site. So let's take a little bit of a walk. We are walking westward on Lexington Green right now in the direction in which the British were marching on the morning of April 19th, and kind of toward the line where John Parker had assembled his men. There were about 77 members of his company assembled on the green that morning. And as I said, John Parker was their captain, and so he had been elected to that role by the men he served with, who were comprised of fellow townsmen, neighbors, relatives. So just the fact that he was elected to be their commander and to serve in that capacity, for me, tells me that they must have had a tremendous amount of respect for him, felt that he was worthy and capable of serving in that role, that they trusted him. They trusted in his judgment, and perhaps he had somehow distinguished himself in prior military service. So we don't have very much documented information about John Parker's prior military service in the French and Indian Wars. But he was elected to serve as captain by his fellow neighbors and townsmen. And Lexington in 1775 had a population of about 700 people. And you have to imagine that they had been being born here and living here and getting married here and dying here for generations already. So even as intertwined as the current population of Lexington was in 1775, their ancestors had also been living here in town, in many cases, for generations. And so when you think about the men that assembled on the green that morning and that degree of familiarity, of interconnectedness, knowing each other their whole lives, blood interconnectedness, fathers, sons, husbands, brothers, all of these men gathered here. For there to have been about 17 casualties, 17 men shot and killed or wounded, that must have been an absolutely terrible loss for the town of Lexington, an absolutely devastating rupture in the community, all in that one morning. So after the engagement here on Lexington Green, the British column kept moving and they passed down that road on the way to Concord. However, John Parker would gather up the remains of his militiamen and meet the British troops for a second time later the same day. Let's go to the spot now where Captain Parker got his revenge. So we are here at the site of Packas Revenge. We are in Minuteman National Historic Park, kind of on the Lexington-Lincoln line. And after the shooting on Lexington Green, the British kept going out to Concord, where they burnt some inconsequential military supplies. They withdrew from Concord and began to go back to Boston, to the relative safety of their garrison. However, they had to go back the way they came, which meant passing through Lexington again. Captain John Parker knew this, and around noon on the 19th, he rounded up the remains of his company, and they came here to that ridge line, kind of in the background. It might be hard to see, but the ground covered a lot of like brownish dead leaves you can kind of look for. It's a little bit of a rise. The militiamen stood on that rise and fired down in my direction where I'm standing. I'm probably standing in the approximate location of the flankers who were traveling on the sides of the British column, kind of clearing the path for the British column, the main column, to come down this road, which is behind me. So as the main British column passed down this road behind me, the militiamen fired from that position on the ridge that I showed you. And the reason I know all this is because there's been a lot of new research at this site over the past couple years. There's been archaeological digs and a ton of work performed by various groups and experts. Friends of the Minuteman National Historic Park took a big part in organizing this. So that's how I know this happened. This is kind of some new information. This site was not really well known up until a couple years ago. People were never really sure, where did John Parker get his revenge? And it was here. And what they did was, after they fired on the main column, they would retreat, kind of withdraw into the woods and change position, move further up the road and fire again. And this is what militia companies were doing as the British retreated, kind of all the way back to Boston. They would follow the rear of the British column along the sides of it and fire and harass them the whole way. That's why the British retreat got turned into a running battle. So this is it. This is the site of Packas Revenge. And you kind of can't help but think how incredibly angry, how furious, how devastated he and his men must have been in these moments as they were here on this site, meeting the British for the second time that day. So it's really incredible to think that those same men that met the British on Lexington Green at about 5:30 a.m. met them again at noon on the retreat and exacted their revenge on them. So we're back on Lexington Green, and this time I'm standing in the approximate location where Packas' men assembled on the morning of the 19th, and they were facing east toward the direction from where the British troops were marching. And John Parker's service on the morning of the 19th here at Lexington Green, and also later in the day at the Packas Revenge site on the Battle Road during the British retreat, were not the last two military acts of Packas' life. I alluded in the beginning of this video that he would not live to see American independence or the end of the war. In fact, John Parker would not live to see the end of the year. But before he died, he served in two additional capacities. On May 6th, 1775, he led a detachment of Lexington men to the siege lines in Cambridge. And of course, this channel is called the Siege of Boston, and that is kind of when all of the American militiamen kind of flooded into the Cambridge area after the British had completed their retreat into Boston. The American militiamen who chased them there, who turned the British retreat into a running battle, did not just go home afterwards. Instead, they encamped in the Cambridge area and in the whole countryside surrounding Boston and laid siege to the city. On May 6th, Captain Parker joined all of those thousands of militiamen who were serving down there and led a group of his Lexington men to Cambridge as well. And they were there until May 10th. Again, on June 17th, he led a detachment of Lexington militiamen to the siege lines, and they served until the 18th. Interestingly, the Battle of Bunker Hill occurred on June 17th. It does not seem that John Parker served at the Battle of Bunker Hill, nor any of the Lexington men he was with. Most likely they stayed in the Cambridge area or elsewhere along the siege lines, even as the battle raged. Thousands of American men did stay on the siege lines instead of being ordered to the Charlestown Peninsula to actually fight in the battle. And the reason was because no one was really clear on whether the British were going to try to make some other type of foray elsewhere on the siege lines. Were they going to try and come out of Boston from Roxbury or cross the Charles River and attack Cambridge? No one really knows. No one knew at the time, I should say. In retrospect, we know that the Battle of June 17th occurred only on the Charlestown Peninsula. But Captain Parker was serving at the siege lines on that date. That seems to have been the last time he served in a military capacity, as he would be dead 4 months later. So I'm here at the old burying ground in Lexington, which was established in 1690. And as you can see, it is absolutely amazing, kind of scary too. So many ancient tombstones here. It really is a totally remarkable spot tucked away about a 3-minute walk from Lexington Green. So Captain Parker died of consumption in September of 1775. And when you go through like old death records from centuries past, or even like decades and decades ago, you come across that word consumption. And it sounds really scary. It sounds like you're being consumed by some type of illness. And you are. And that illness is modern day tuberculosis. And so that's what John Parker was suffering from before it killed him in September of 1775. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training. It is difficult to know if John Parker was symptomatic on April 19th or in May or June when he was still serving? Was he coughing? Was he coughing up blood? Did he have a fever? Was he experiencing chills, night sweats, fatigue? We don't know. But it's possible, I suppose, that he was ill already in April, as he would pass away in September. So I had wanted to take you all to his grave site. And I was really excited to go. And I thought to myself, wow, it's so funny. I've lived in the Boston area my entire life, and I've never visited John Parker's grave. Well, that's because there isn't one. And that's the big surprise that I was holding for you at the end of this video. John Parker's burial site is unknown. There is no original marker or tombstone that shows the spot of his burial. There is this memorial, which was erected in the 19th century. And as you can tell, it is really eroded, and you can really barely even see the words, but basically it says, to the memory of Captain John Parker of the Lexington militia. It gives his date of birth and the fact that he was captain of the militia on April 19th, 1775. And there are some American flags here at the base. He is thought to be buried in this cemetery, possibly underneath this 19th century memorial stone, but no one really knows for sure. So for now, we will leave the story of Captain John Parker. If you're interested in more on the events of April 19th, 1775, I'll post some more videos here. I'll also leave some information on the Packas Revenge site in the description box below. I hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel so that you can join in on more history adventures, and please consider giving this video a thumbs up, as it really helps get the video out to more people so we can continue to grow this community on YouTube. Thank you all so much, as always, for sharing the journey with me, and I'll see you on the next video.